Kash Patel and Adam Schiff confrontation was never just about who gets to define what reform means once a powerful federal institution has already lost a huge amount of public trust. That is the real story. Not simply a single heated oversight clash, not simply one more Senate hearing argument, but a war over whether the FBI is being reclaimed from abuse or repurposed in the image of political revenge. That is why this pair matters. When Kash Patel and Adam Schiff collide, the argument expands beyond one headline and becomes a fight over rules, permission, legitimacy, and public memory. The current backbone of the story makes that impossible to miss. In April 2026, Patel sued The Atlantic for defamation after an article accused him of erratic behavior, alleged drinking, and long absences that affected FBI operations, turning questions about competence, image, and retaliation into a live media war. In February 2026, Reuters reported that the FBI had secretly obtained phone records of Patel and Susie Wiles during the Biden administration as part of Jack Smith's investigation, giving Patel a fresh piece of evidence for his long-standing narrative of deep state overreach. That all landed on top of the larger Reuters retribution tracker, which documented how figures from Patel's old enemies list world and the broader anti-Trump investigative order had faced real consequences under the new climate. That sequence matters because it shows why the pair cannot be handled like ordinary opposition politics. The dispute is not happening in the abstract. It is happening inside live arguments over war powers, federalism, intelligence authority, institutional trust, or coalition futures, or the future shape of executive government. Start with Kash Patel. Patel's politics run on one core promise. The federal investigative class was never as neutral as it claimed, and the old guardians of that system still do not want to admit it. He sounds dangerous to critics because he takes movement grievance and gives it institutional ambition. That is more serious than cable anger. It suggests a state that will not just denounce its former custodians, but occupy their desks. When Patel talks about overreach, subpoenas, or malicious media narratives, he is not merely defending himself. He is defending the legitimacy of a whole counter-history of the Trump years. This is one reason Kash Patel can be so effective in the attention economy. Kash tends to compress complexity into a moral line that feels emotionally usable. People do not have to master every procedural detail to know what side they are supposed to feel closer to. Now, look at Adam Schiff. Schiff hears something very different. For him, the danger is not that the FBI once had too much independence from Trump, but that under people like Patel, it is being bent toward loyalty, score settling, and narrative revision. That is why Schiff matters as a foil. He is not just another Democrat. He is one of the most recognizable public faces of the argument that institutions still need defenders willing to sound alarm when they are being hollowed out from inside. When Schiff presses Patel, so he is really asking whether reform can still mean professional stewardship, or whether reform has already been redefined as vengeance against the last generation of stewards. That makes Adam Schiff such a dangerous and useful antagonist. Adam is not simply disagreeing with Kash Patel. Adam is trying to stop Kash Patel's preferred story from becoming the public's easiest interpretation of the moment. That is the confrontation. Patel says the Bureau cannot recover until the people who politicized it lose their moral authority. Schiff says the Bureau cannot recover if the people running it treat grievance as a governing philosophy. Both men speak the language of rescue. That is what makes the pair so combustible. The country is not choosing between repair and destruction. It is choosing between rival rescue stories that imply almost opposite futures. There is also a narrative asymmetry here. Patel can be vivid, personal, and accusatory. Schiff must sound grave without sounding theatrical. There is also a coalition story here. Kash Patel helps define one possible future for the camp behind Kash. Schiff helps define one possible future for the coalition behind Adam. Each side can use the other as a live symbol of what it fears most. This is where long-form treatment becomes more valuable than short clips. A short clip can show anger. It usually cannot show the architecture underneath the anger. But the architecture is everything here. It explains why an argument over a commission, a raid, a conference, a lawsuit, a scandal, or a deployment suddenly feels like a referendum on what kind of republic the country is becoming. That is also why the media dimension matters so much. Kash and Adam do not enter the same public terrain with equal advantages. One side may thrive on compression, speed, and emotional certainty. The other may depend on widening the frame, slowing the story down, and persuading people that the obvious interpretation is not the safest one. And then there is the institutional consequence. If Kash Patel's way of narrating the conflict wins, the relevant institution becomes easier to treat as an instrument of will, necessity, or disruption. If Schiff's way of narrating the conflict wins, the institution becomes easier to treat as something that still requires visible limits, explicit permission, or inherited guardrails. Another reason the Kash-Adam confrontation deserves attention is that both sides often speak in the language of repair while imagining almost opposite repairs. One side says the system will not recover until old custodians lose their monopoly on seriousness. The other says the system will not recover if disruption itself becomes the new measure of authenticity. And perhaps that is why the pair keeps returning. The country still has not answered the question underneath it. When trust collapses, who should inherit legitimacy? The people who defended the institution before, or the people who made their careers attacking that defense as cover for deeper failure? For your channel style, this is exactly the kind of confrontation that works. It has real characters, recent backbones, strategic consequence, moral tension, and an underlying system question larger than either person. It is not merely who landed a better line, it is who gets to define the meaning of power while the public is still deciding what it has just watched. It is one of the clearest current examples of what happens when both sides claim they are trying to save the same institution while meaning almost opposite things by save. Schiff says reform means protecting the Bureau from political vengeance. Patel says reform means wrenching it away from people who hid politics under procedure. Every new headline around Patel, whether it is a lawsuit, a firing, a phone record controversy, or a hearing, keeps reopening the same deeper fight. That is why the Kash Patel and Schiff story belongs in long form. It is not because the personalities are loud, and it is because the country keeps using figures like these to decide whether force, oversight, skepticism, procedure, and legitimacy still mean what they used to mean. And until that question feels settled, the confrontation will keep returning in different clothes.